going to tell you the story of Ken Rex McElroy, and more importantly, the very small farming town of Skidmore, Missouri. We got to set this up a little bit. This Ken McElroy guy was a piece of work. They called him the town bully. A bully to me is somebody that kind of picks on the underprivileged or the people that can't defend themselves, McElroy was a little bit more than a bully. For 10 years, he terrorized the town of Skidmore. Everything from stealing hogs and cattle, rustling, to arson. This guy was a piece of work. He married a girl that was 14, and at the same time, he married another woman who was 13 at the time. He had 10 kids between them. It is just an absolute mess. This guy, between 24 and 37 felony counts against him throughout the course of this 10 years. But he always came up with witnesses because he would threaten them. He would threaten anyone who testified against him, and outright saying he'd kill a man that testified against him and wanted him to spend the rest of his life behind bars. These people called law enforcement. They tried everything they could to have someone do something about this Ken Rex McElroy. And for various reasons, over these 10 years, nobody did a thing. They tried local law enforcement. He shot one man, a store owner, with a shotgun. Prior to that, he shot a man in the gut with a shotgun. And when it came to trial, he conveniently had two witnesses that said, no, we were in the next town over hunting. I wasn't even in town. And he just kept getting away scot-free every time, over and over and over for 10 years. The intimidation tactics of this guy, he would sit out in front of their house. Anybody he didn't like, anybody who was going to say a foul word against him, I never could come across what he did for a living. Obviously he did some wrestling, but I didn't ever ascertain how he could make money to afford this lawyer that kept getting him off these convictions. 24 accusations, federal counts, 37. The number doesn't even matter. After about 3, you got a problem on your hands. They knew they had a problem. The question was what to do about it. There's been books written on the subject, numerous TV documentaries and whatnot. There's been a movie made about it. One of them you can watch here on YouTube. It's called No One Saw a Thing. We're getting to that. He shot a 70-year-old store owner with a shotgun in the neck over a 2-cent piece of gum. Supposedly his children, this is McElroy's children, one of them 14 and one of them 4, came in and kind of went nuts in the store or whatever, and the 4-year-old grabbed some 2-cent bubble gum and was just going to steal it. There was a ruckus made about that. McElroy's wife gets involved, and because this guy ran roughshod over this town for 10 years, and she's like, well, you're about to meet Kenneth McElroy. Well, she goes home, tells him about it. He shows back up with a shotgun, finds the 70-year-old store owner, and blasts him in the neck. He tried to kill the man. He actually was incarcerated and arrested for this one. This is blatant attempted manslaughter at minimum, right? He bonds out the next day. The judge allowed it. And the town is like, what do we have to do to where we can sleep at night and have some peace in the community? This is a little bitty town. You're talking 300-ish people, little farming community, clear up in the northwest corner of Missouri. All they're trying to do is live. So they're all up in arms about this attempted murder is what it was. And they call a town meeting in the Legion Hall, as you would do, in a small town in northwest Missouri. And everybody's up in arms, and the rumors are flying, and this and that and the other, and supposedly some money changed hands. We don't know that that's fact or not. That's the rumor. The sheriff of this little town of Skidmore, Missouri, was at the meeting. He leaves the meeting and suddenly has a call out of town. He's heading to Maryville, the next town over. As this happens, old Ken Rex decides to visit the local tavern where he'd been a menace for years. The bar owner said every time he visited, and frequented this establishment, this little tavern. It cost him $60 at least because everybody left. Nobody wanted to be around the man. And he just stared. He just boring. He's a big guy, 6'2", 6'3", big pork chop, sideburns. You can look him up. And he just intimidated and set outside people's houses, fire a shotgun into the air. I mean, a total bully is not the word, really. He was much more almost, a terrorist, minus the state funding. So the town convenes this meeting in the Legion Hall. What's going to be done? Everybody's up in arms. They leave the meeting. The sheriff leaves town. They go to the tavern, and it just so happens that McElroy gets wind of this, and so he goes into town and goes to the tavern. And they gave him a chance and said, you need to leave town immediately. Well, you don't talk to, the king that way. It was a very uncomfortable scene. All the eyewitnesses would agree to that. McElroy and his wife leave the bar, the tavern, and they go and climb into his pickup truck and start the truck up. And everybody that was in the tavern came out to the street. They were giving away free beer at the tavern, laughing. The decision had been made. Well, the people coming out, and estimates vary between 12 and 40 to 60 people. Well, they came out right after him, gave him another chance to leave. I don't know what was said. They surround the truck. Shots are fired, and they slayed the man as he sat in his pickup truck with his wife, blew his brains out. So you have a murder, and you have witnesses. The trouble with that is, it's been 42 years ago this happened. Nobody saw a thing. Not one eyewitness would come forward. And when they did, and they might speak a little bit, they say, well, let me think on it. And then go home and then come back the next day and they say, no, I recant my testimony. I forgot. I didn't see anything. Because they all stood together to rid the town of this menace. It was broad daylight when this happened. I mean, you should watch the documentary. It's fascinating stuff. A lot of these old boys are just, they're farmers. They're good old boys. This is kind of an odd town. Well, when pushed far enough, they tried to get law enforcement involved. And for various reasons over the years, over and over and over, Ken McElroy walked free, and it was time to do something about it. Now, in the course of all this, his 13-year-old wife, the second wife, Trina, she's a piece of work. She brought statutory rape charges against her own husband. And then came back later and said, well, they weren't true. He didn't rape me. That wasn't true. McElroy asked her permission, her parents' permission, because she was a minor, to marry her. They said, absolutely not. This is a grown man. And our daughter is a child. Well, mysteriously, their house burned down. Later, their barn burned down. It just never ends. Well, here Trina is defending him, to his death and beyond. He didn't do nothing wrong. He ain't done nothing. It's weird that she's up north, but I mean, this could be the deep south in a heartbeat. Not the sharpest knife in the drawer. What about the statutory rape charges that you personally brought against him? That wasn't true. The trouble with that is, the insidious thing about liars is that they lie about lying. And then you expect us to believe you over something important like his murder. There was a state grand jury brought in to no avail. There was a federal grand jury brought in to no avail. The FBI showed up in farmer's gear and started asking questions. And when the townspeople wised up to this, and then they wouldn't say anything to anybody. They wouldn't give any interviews. The entire town knew what was up with this. You got a dead man on your hands, and nobody says a word for 40 years. I'm not a fan of violence, and I'm not a fan of vigilante justice. What were they going to do? This had gone on and gone on and gone on, and the man just kept walking away scot-free. And on top of that, he continued to terrorize this town. Something had to be done, and something was. You should look into the story. It's rather interesting. Hey, thank you for your time. If you know something about this or whatever, you can put it in the comments. Thanks for watching. Appreciate your time. See you next time.